So, good afternoon, Matt. Thank you very much for joining us on the Overseas Athlete Podcast.
Sweet, thanks for having me. Glad to be here.
No, it's fantastic. I'm really looking forward to this. As I was saying, the first one in the golf world that's
Yep.
joined us. So, and a different story, just not a normal golfer going around. You're on the
No,
World Long
definitely
Drive
not.
Tour, which sounds pretty cool.
Yeah, it's been a great experience so far, but definitely different to what your normal golf fans would be used to.
So I'll let you kick us off. You could give us an idea of where you're from. I know you're currently you reside. I know you're in America, but you're from the Gold Coast. But sort of where you grew up, where you are now, and how you got into the World Long Drive Tour.
Yeah, so I'm a Gold Coast boy. I've been born and bred there my whole life, and my long drive journey has been something that's happened very recently and basically came out of nowhere just over 12 months ago. Long drive's something I've always watched growing up as a kid. Always loved it. Always loved seeing what those boys were able to do. But it's not something I thought that I would ever do until just over a year ago. I was kind of pushed into my first event by mates and coaches who saw how far I could hit the ball on the golf course, but I had a really short John Rahm style swing, but I was able to hit speeds at the top level of the PGA. So the coaches I was with thought if I endeavored a bit deeper into some long drive technique that I'd be pretty good at it. So I got pushed into my first amateur event, which was in my hometown on the Gold Coast. So I competed there as an amateur and won that by quite a sizable margin and also beat the Australian pros that were there. So the organiser of Long Drive Australia asked if I wanted to represent Australia at the Amateur World Championships, which was just 10 weeks later, and I agreed to. And for anyone that knows me, they know I go all out with everything I do. So from the next day onwards, it was a full-time commitment to long drive training, and I haven't stopped ever since. And within 9 months of training from the start, I became one of the fastest athletes in history. And since March, I've been in America competing against the best on the World Long Drive Tour.
That's incredible.
Yeah.
That's an incredible story. So did you grow up wanting to become a golfer? Is that how this all began?
So I started playing golf when I was 5 years old. I was fortunate enough to live in very close proximity to a 9-hole golf course that my parents allowed me to walk to and from too. So that's where my golfing journey started. And my goal was always to compete in America through the college system and then through a tour. And I had scholarship opportunities lined up, but I went to a very academically focused school. So during grade 12, my academics took priority and the golf day didn't quite keep improving on the trajectory that I needed to pursue that. So I didn't go to college golf in America. And actually, once my junior career was over, I took about 5-6 years off golf because I fell out of love with it. At that time, there was a bit of a gap between junior golf and professional golf, and not as much guidance for amateur golfers. So I was basically going into having a full crack at turning pro, and I wasn't quite at that level. So I fell out of love with the sport and then picked it back up again when I was deep into my corporate career because I missed it, and golf's always great for business. And then, I was playing high-level amateur golf. Before I started long drive, I was playing off a +1 handicap. Actually pushed that to a +5 handicap during my long drive training just from the extra length, which always helped. And then I threw myself in the deep end with this long drive career and wanted to compete against the best in the world from the start. So that's where the training mantra evolved from.
And that was, as you say, like a quick turnaround from joining an event, obviously doing really, really well, and then 10 weeks later you're on a big competition. So what did you sort of do, as you said, from the next day you were 100% in? What sort of steps did you have to take to get yourself to the level that you thought you needed to be or that you wanted to be?
Exactly. So as I mentioned before, if I do something, it's to be the best in the world. It doesn't matter what level I begin at. I did have a good starting point, having a solid golf basis, but to compete against the big boys on the long drive tour, I needed a lot more speed. and I had a short time frame to accumulate that. So from the next day, I got a high performance coach behind me. I got a strength and conditioning coach behind me. I had one of the best long drive coaches in the world behind me, as well as a recovery team. So it was that full-time commitment, and then 40 to 50 hours of training a week from day one, from starting a sport, which was key to how quickly I was able to improve. I mean, I like to say I did about 5 years work inside the first 6 months when it comes to this sport. There was the 40 to 50 hours like physical on-site training, but then there was hours upon hours of study and shadow swings and nutrition and recovery on top of that. So, I mean, that up until leaving for the US to compete on the World Long Drive Tour in March, it comfortably would have been in excess of 60 hours committed to the sport from day one.
Wow. And touching on quickly the people that you had, say the strength and conditioning, you got the best World Long Drive Tour coach,
Yeah.
long drive golf coach. Were they local? Were you lucky that they were local, or were they close by?
I was very fortunate that they were all in close proximity. Brett Mallett has worked with does still work with a number of high-profile NRL players, a lot of elite-level fighters. Hayden Edgerton, he again has worked with a number of NRL players and elite athletes. And then, but most fundamental to my development was Craig Parker. He's been a certified PGA coach for a couple of decades and worked with golfers through all levels, but he's an absolute long drive guru. He can break down the biomechanics of any golf swing better than anyone I've ever witnessed, and then apply techniques to his students to maximize clubhead speed. So Craig's the coach that trains my best mate Seb Twiddell as well. So between Seb and I, Craig's got the double world record for the fastest man to ever swing a golf club and hit a golf ball, and then me, arguably the most recent athlete, and arguably the only one that's increased their clubhead speed by 35 miles per hour inside 9 months. So his results speak for themselves at this point.
Yeah. And how did you? I suppose you would have had to go in with a real open mind, as you say. Like your mentality, obviously, you can tell already that you want to be number one in the world,
Mm-hmm.
and from tomorrow I'm going to train as hard as I can. But did you have to go in like mentally and just go, all right, I'm going to let these guys like put your full trust in them in regards? So you obviously had a long drive yourself, but to get to that level.
Yeah, absolutely. I was going into long drive knowing that I didn't have the knowledge required to teach myself this. And I think one of my biggest skills and one of the reasons I was able to improve so quickly is because I am coachable. I put these people in place in my team for a reason, and it's because they're experts. And all I've simply done until now is do exactly what my team and my coaches have told me to this point. I think there's a lot of athletes that let their ego get in the way of their potential and don't follow to a T what their team outlined for them. And I mean, they might get there in the end, but if they did everything they're told, they'll get there a lot quicker.
Yeah, as you said before, like you had a corporate world, and you'll probably see the similarities between a corporate world or a sporting world. When everyone's pointing in the right direction, results can come very, very quick. Very important.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I couldn't agree with that more.
And what type of training then? You obviously said you're doing 50 hours a week. Like that's a lot of training. What were the main things you were working on at the beginning? And then sort of as you moved, what did you have to sort of, I guess, understand or work on first?
Yeah, so I've competed at an elite level sport my whole life across a number of sports. But I knew I needed to change my body. Long drive is an incredibly explosive sport. It's a full body movement. Every part of the body is getting thrown into a golf swing. So I know I needed to increase my strength and explosivity. My team took parts from the most explosive athletes in the world, like 100-meter sprinters, powerlifters, Olympic lifters. Any little 1% we could take from other sports to make my body more explosive, that's what we focused on. So yeah, the strength and conditioning side was fundamental, and then the other side was the technique side. I had a really good fundamental golf swing. It was built for consistency, and it was built to shoot low scores. But long drive technique maximizes everything on the human body when it comes to rotation and ground movement, ground force, everything. So with my coach Craig, we maximize every possible aspect to pull every mile per hour of speed out.
And on the strength and conditioning side, when you first start, did you changing your body shape? What sport were you used to playing before?
So the sport I was competing in before long drive was jiu-jitsu. I was quickly rising through the ranks there and doing a lot of competitions there. So I still had a good basis of strength, but I was a lot leaner, and my legs were a lot leaner. In jiu-jitsu, we try and maintain some leaner legs. It makes attacking our opponents a little bit easier. But that's probably where I saw the biggest change. There's a lot of strength in the legs. You need some powerful glutes, hamstrings, and quads to generate massive ground force to increase your club head speed in golf.
And how did your body handle that change? And did you find you had a couple of niggles or little injuries at the beginning, or how was the recovery? How did you sort of work through that process?
Yeah, so I was religious with my recovery. I was fortunate enough to be sponsored by Riggs Recovery on the Gold Coast.
Good place.
From the outset. So every day was an hour to 2 hours of recovery, and you absolutely notice a difference, as well as making sure I was diligent on my nutrition, my sleep, and my supplements, especially like omega-3s, glucosamine, things like that, just to give your body as much of an aid as you can to recover as quickly as you can. So your next session, you can put in 100% every time.
And did you feel the difference, like within your own body, going from your jiu-jitsu stuff into this and having such a heavy workload? Obviously, it's going to shock the body, but did you feel that recovery and the change in nutrition? Like, it just takes time, obviously, but it makes a huge difference.
Yeah, absolutely. For this sport, this was definitely the most stringent I was with my recovery, and absolutely noticed a difference. My body was copying a beating from jiu-jitsu, but I now know if I followed the same kind of recovery protocols as I was during my preseason for long drive, I would have been in much better shape.
Yeah, that's incredible. And what were you doing more so at rigs? Like a bit of ice baths, bit of pads, like compression pads?
Yeah, a lot of compression, mainly the hot magnesium pools, a little bit of cryo, a little bit of cold water treatment, sauna. Yeah, generally just circle through the bunch each session, but it was mainly just maximizing as much time as I could spend in the hot magnesium pools.
And that's obviously, as we say, like that's a huge commitment time-wise. What were you doing to keep yourself afloat financially, paying bills and doing bits and pieces if you're doing 50 hours a week of training?
Yeah, so I was very fortunate the position I put myself in before I started long drive, that if I had a 9 to 5, I simply wouldn't have been able to achieve what I did. I also wouldn't be competing in America right now. So about 3 years ago now, I set up a social media agency that I operate and oversee. So I would work around my training instead of the other way around. So I could fit those hours in where I needed to be. I could outsource certain aspects where I needed to be. But I did downsize the business. It was kind of in a bit of a no man's land. It was push harder and basically be able to outsource everything and make the same kind of money, or downsize. So I had to choose to downsize, drop a few clients off the business. But I mean, it still kept me liquid and allowed me to train as hard as I did. And then as I started achieving speeds and records that were in the highest caliber of athletes, I was able to start reaching out for sponsorships and sell them on the dream, despite not having competed on the World Long Drive Tour yet. So I was able to get some financial backing, which definitely helped. But even now, I'm still working almost full time while I'm on the road, while still chasing more sponsorship dollars and as many opportunities as I can. So it's a balance of training and staying liquid.
I suppose, yeah. So at the start, and I spoke to someone, they were on the show a couple of weeks ago. He's in a similar boat. He runs a digital marketing company because he can do it on his time as he tries to train and fit that in. So it's important, I guess, if you can have some sort of flexibility to do that. So with your sponsorship then, like to sort of touch on that, how do you approach that for someone, as you say, without having competed on a world tour before and going to companies for money to help you? What are the sort of things that you're showing them that you want them to buy into?
Yeah, so I'm fortunate to have a lot of strong connections in the business world in Australia, and a lot of relationships with a lot of people who are more than happy to vouch for me, vouch for my character, vouch for my past achievements. I've won a world championship previously in another sport, which dramatically helped my ability to attract sponsorship dollars. Like if you've won a world championship in a previous sport, you've definitely got the mindset required to go to the next level with whatever you pursue afterwards. So that initial connection wasn't as difficult as most athletes face, but from then it was selling them on the dream and the potential and showing them how quickly I was making progress in a sport where it was meant to take years and years of development, and I was doing it in a few months. And then just showing them the trajectory line and the potential and going from there.
Yeah, that's awesome. And I guess from a corporate's point of view, they like a good story as well. They want to be part of a good story. So if you can show like that, that's amazing results in a short period of time. It probably does make it a bit easier to get some people on board.
Absolutely. And Australians always love an underdog. And I mean, in long drive, they know some of the big names in the sport, and Australians love to beat Americans, and that's what they were helping fund. So
always Americans and the English always love beating them for sure. Any sport doesn't matter. Oh, that's brilliant. And then, so your first trip, like so, the first competition that you went to in America, how was that experience? What was involved there?
Yeah, so my first actual event was Amateur World Championships last year, and being an Australian athlete was a big disadvantage. We don't have the resources to be able to practice outside on a driving range. There's no driving ranges in Australia long enough for me to hit at. So I was either hitting indoors or hitting into a net. So my first event was actually the first time I've ever seen my long drive ball flight, and seeing how far it went in the air. I knew the disadvantage I was going to that event, but it didn't matter. I mean, I'd always have high expectations on myself, but didn't quite get the result I wanted for that first event as an amateur. So went home and smashed the off season and came back to America as a professional for my first event in Mesquite as a professional. And yeah, it was a little bit surreal for me. As I said, I've been watching this sport almost my whole life as a golfer, and love watching the long ball. So instantly I threw myself into the deep end, and I was competing against household names of the sport and guys I've been watched competing for years and years. The adrenaline on the first event was unmatched. I mean, I do a lot of crazy and silly things in my life. I fly a jetpack 20 meters above concrete, and people think that's crazy, but the adrenaline I got being on the tee at my first long drive event was surreal. Like after I finished a set, I almost couldn't remember what happened. But that's one of the reasons why I threw myself in the deep end this year, was to gain as much experience in this sport that I can, The guys that I compete against have been doing this for years, and you can see how comfortable they look out there on the grid. And then you can see when new guys step up now, the difference. So I'm 10 events deep in my rookie year, gaining experience, getting better at every event, sitting just outside the top 30 in the world in my first year, continually learning, continually getting better, and loving every moment.
It's amazing. And I mean, because I'm older now as well, like nothing beats experience. And you sort of pointed that out there as that first time you go up there and you don't really remember what happened. But I suppose, how did you, beforehand, did you feel, or I don't know this, because you can tell from your mentality already, I want to win everything. But did you have a bit of patience within yourself to go, all right, it's my first event. I know it's going to take time, but just like that, get as many games, as many comps under your belt as you can, so that moving forward now you stand up, you're a bit more relaxed and probably perform better?
Yeah, absolutely. There was a lot of expectations from a lot of people in and outside of the sport with me approaching my first event. Because within a short period of time, I had become one of the fastest athletes in the world in terms of clubhead and ball speed. But there's a lot more to the sport than just swinging really fast. There's a lot of experience required when it comes to tournament conditions. And despite competing in other sports at an elite level, I didn't have any experience in this sport. And I mean, I'll always go out there and push my absolute hardest to win at whatever I do. But I did have a realistic approach to the sport, and taking that approach has paid off. I've got better at every event. I mean, on stream at the last couple of events, the commentating team have noted multiple times that I've been the most improved athlete in the sport this year, which is something I'm proud of. I wasn't necessarily born with the freak genetics of some of the athletes in this sport, but my work my work ethic has allowed me to keep up with the big boys, and I'll keep pushing until I'm number one in this sport.
Yeah, that's fantastic. That's awesome, and no doubt it sounds like you will. With the first amateur event you went to, as you said, you didn't perform as well as you wanted to, and then you came back. What was that down to? Was that just more technique, or was there a bit more strength, or what did you work on then when you came back to make that jump? And how do you make a jump from amateur to professional?
Yeah, so it was mainly down to the technique. I mean, discussing with my coach very early on, we've always had a long term outlook and focus on this sport. I could have gone to the first event with with a swing that was probably a bit more solid and focused on winning that comp. But my focus long term is always becoming the world number one. So we've only had eyes for that goal and building a swing that could achieve that. So turning up to that first event, I was the fastest amateur in the world by a long way. I just lacked consistency in ball striking and shots on the grid, which cost me in at the start of the event. I started finding some good form before I was knocked out, unfortunately. So I think if I stayed in that event for a little bit longer, it would have been interesting. But yeah, the lack of experience in the conditions, as well as a little bit of technical mishap, cost me there.
I was going to say as well, is it also a change of environment? So you're obviously not hitting against the net now in Australia.
Mhm.
You're in the US firstly,
Yeah,
but then you're on an actual long drive circuit and a long drive, I guess, runway.
yeah,
Did that play a bit of a part in it as well? Just new surroundings.
yeah, absolutely. And yeah, as I said before, it was something that was completely surreal. Competing in Mesquite, which is a purpose-built long drive facility. It's the absolute dream location for all long drive athletes. Somewhere I've seen my heroes of the sport compete since I was a kid, and then being there, experiencing it myself was something that I had to overcome and just try and focus on competing.
And what other challenges did you face, say, between travel, jet lag, that type of thing? And how did you sort of manage, I guess, your routine, your sleep and everything to try and get yourself ready for competition?
Yeah, so body management has been a continual learning process this year, especially the week before an event, what I shouldn't do to manage and to train my body so I can compete at 100%. Those first few events, I was commuting back and forth from Australia to the US. So managing jet lag was important. Generally 24 to 48 hours before I change time zone, I'll start flipping over to the new time zone. So to minimize how much time it takes in the new location to get on the time zone. Um, but not having access to the same facilities as I did back home was a big hindrance and challenge. Like, I was very spoiled to be able to drive 10 minutes to my gym and train as hard as I want, drive to my coach, drive 15 minutes and do as much recovery as I want. And then suddenly you're in a new location, and something like recovery centers in America are actually few and far between, which I was completely shocked about. On the Gold Coast, there's about 15 of them I can choose from.
Yeah.
In somewhere like Las Vegas or Mesquite, they just don't exist. So you're suddenly trying to find an alternative solution, like even just a hot spa with Epsom salts at your hotel, to try and do your recovery after training. So there's a lot of challenges in that space that I've been learning. And one of the reasons why I've been trying to find a base in the US as quick as I could, somewhere that has access to all those, to minimize the travel and stuff before events too. So spending as much time in America as I had and networking and making connections like I have, I do have a number of places in the US now that I can base myself out of, to overcome that challenge.
Yeah, as you said at the start, like how important that body management and especially recovery is. So I guess between flights and then not having, as you say, like direct access to that stuff would be really challenging. So now what do you try and do? Do you try and give yourself like a week if you can, like base yourself a week, a couple of weeks, or do you stay now there for a few months at a time?
Um, so the most important thing so in long drive, your central nervous system plays a massive part. There'll be some days where even if your body feels fully recovered, you feel great, ready to swing fast, your central nervous system hasn't quite recovered fast enough. So you're not going to be fast and twitchy to swing the golf club as fast as you want. So I'll give myself a minimum 2 full days of no long drive hitting before an event. And no heavy lifting within 3 days of that event. There'll be more like plyometrics, some more explosive movements, stuff like that. And then just a very light hitting session the day before competition. That's the main focus. And then the other thing in America, with how poor all the airlines are in America, I won't travel to an event the day before the event. It'll be 2 days before event in case that flight gets cancelled. Then I will be there the day before. It also gives me a full day and a half on site or on location to just relax or do what I need to do.
Have you found that? Has that been a big problem, the airlines and just the flights over there?
Yeah, the amount of cancellation flights. The other big thing is bags not making it to location. So if you're trying to travel to an event the night before and your bag doesn't show up, you're not competing. And they're like, "Oh, sorry, we'll pay for your next flight." It's like, well, that's not good enough. This is my livelihood. This is the reason why I'm here. So unfortunately, we do have to take those kind of things into account.
Yeah. Yeah, so from my experience, like with footballers and soccer players, they'll go to the stadium, the day of or the day before a game. They'll walk around the pitch, they'll have a look at the stadium and sort of take in the surrounds. You do that? Do you do that as well in long drive? Is that important?
Yeah, absolutely. It's really important for long drive athletes to walk the grid, the physical area where we're hitting the balls into, because all grids have different characteristics. We'll take a ball out there, we'll see which side of the grid's faster, which side's slower. If there's any kind of dirt or anything that you could get a better bounce off. Sometimes there's slight hills and stuff you can take advantage of. So it's important to go out there as an athlete and see what you're competing on.
And all those little things, I guess, as you say, can make a bit of a difference the next day, and it can help you, I guess, prepare as best you can.
Absolutely, yeah. When you're competing against the best in the world, every yard makes a difference. And if you can find something other athletes haven't seen, it's a big advantage.
And what are the fans and the crowds like? Like, how many people are turning up to these events in America?
So we're fortunate our last event in Kingsport was our first event back on TV on Golf Channel. So we had a crowd of about 1,000 people there. So that was exciting. It was a close packed grandstand too. So even though it was only 1,000 people, it felt like a lot more. And people that come to long drive events love it. It's an electric sport. The athletes get into it. So there's a real energy around the sport. It's a great spectator sport. People can see things that they don't really think is possible. Athletes hitting balls over 400 yards. So it's a great place to be during a long drive event, and I'm confident that's just going to keep increasing.
Is it a bit of a party atmosphere? I've seen a few of the clips on YouTube, and it can be, as you say, quite boisterous and quite eventful.
Yeah, exactly. It is very much a party kind of atmosphere, like the watering holes we see on like Live Tour and PGA Tour. It's the same kind of vibe, and it's a lot of fun.
Oh, that's awesome. And then, how many different places? You said now it's on TV over there. Is that fairly new? Or did it used to be on TV and then it sort of stopped over the COVID period, and now it's back?
Correct. Yeah, COVID was a big hurdle for long drive. It was quite detrimental to the sport. World Long Drive or it was Remax World Long Drive, and there was a few other organisations and stuff involved. And the majority of events then were on TV, and they had large prize pools and big crowds. And then COVID kind of killed off the sport. The players got together and formed a players' association to keep the sport going. And then we were really fortunate at the start of this year. GF Sports and Entertainment bought PLDA, which was the Players Association. They bought the previous World Long Drive, who were hosting the events previously, and in accordance with that, got TV rights deals back. So that's why we're back on TV. Basically, from what I've heard from our events now onwards,
They'll all be on, and they do live events. And how
yeah.
many different events do they run, say, in a year through America for long drive under this banner?
So the World Long Drive Tour, which is the biggest tour in the world, is 10 tour events and then World Championships all in the US. That's going to be expanding to have international events on the World Long Drive Tour next year, to include Europe, South America, possibly Asia, and possibly Australia if we can push hard enough. But I've been fortunate enough to compete on the European Long Drive Tour this year. I did an event in Germany towards the start of the year. And a few weeks ago, I was the only non-Asian athlete invited to compete at the Japanese National Championships. So I competed there. I've also got an invitation, again, as the only non-Asian athlete to compete at the Korean Championships at the end of September and the Asian Championships in November. So the main focus is obviously World Long Drive, but I'm doing as much as I can to grow my own personal brand and grow the sport internationally and doing these international events.
And how do you get an invite to that then, as the only non-Asian at the Japanese Nationals? How does that come about?
So very early on in the season, me and my training partner Seb were pushing incredibly hard at training, and he broke the 2 world records, and I became one of the fastest athletes in the world as well. And both being Australian, the Japanese organisation knew from a marketing perspective it would be great to have 2 fast Australians there at the event to help grow the profile of the event. And then from me competing in Japan, I achieved a tied 5th finish, and developed great rapport with the organization, the athletes, and the spectators. And the South Korean organization saw all that and extended an invite to me for those and for those events.
That's amazing. And how's the setup, say in Japan or even in Germany, compared to the US? Are they behind? Is the US the leader and everyone's now catching up because it's sort of kicking on again?
So the World Long Drive Tour is the biggest stage, but I was surprised at the level of the event for the Japanese nationals. So it was their biggest event of the year, but it was very impressive. Their live stream was incredibly professional. They had a really good stage for the athletes to compete on, big grandstands which were full with spectators. The Japanese are incredibly passionate people when it comes to their sport, so they got behind the athletes and they got behind me a lot. And then all the athletes were incredibly grateful that I made the effort to come all the way to Japan and compete at their event. So they were incredibly welcoming and friendly. So, I mean, overall, it was one of the best weeks of my life and definitely the most fun I've had competing so far in this sport.
Yeah, that's incredible. And the Japanese, as we know, like they're good at a lot of sports, but
Mm-hmm.
they're so polite, so disciplined, so well mannered. How is the atmosphere? Because you don't imagine them being as boisterous, but maybe they are.
You'd be surprised.
Yeah.
They might be the most boisterous athletes I've seen in the sport. I I went over not knowing what to expect, and only a handful of the top Japanese athletes have the resources and means to come compete in America on the World Long Drive Tour. Albeit they don't compete at every event, they compete at a few. So I'd assumed that they were going to be the only competitive athletes over there, but surprisingly, there was a lot of incredibly impressive athletes at that event. And I mean, as I said before, they're very passionate when it comes to their sport. So they got just as involved when they were on the grid competing against me.
That's awesome. That's really cool. Because yeah, the
Yeah,
Japanese, as I say, that they're such good people to be around. It's good that they're so passionate about it. I was going to touch on sort of the finances and what things cost you. Like, 'cause I know through the PGA, if you're a golfer, you sort of pay and you look after your own. You're like your own sole trader in a way.
yeah.
Just touching on the Japanese thing and the German thing first as well. Like, so you get invited, but does it cost you to go there? How does the sort of financial world of long drive work?
Yeah, so I say that even though the sport's been around for a while, for a long time, 20, 30, 40 years, it's back in its infancy stage because of what happened during COVID. So it's really having to reestablish itself. So athletes attracting sponsors and stuff like that is something that's kind of new again, and something people are deciding if they get behind. Um, so yeah, obtaining those invitations is important. I mean, that's how you are able to compete there. But there currently is no help from them for you to come over. So it's either pay your own way through your own source of income or through sponsorships and that kind of thing.
So is that where, when you touched on before that there's not many Japanese on the American World Long Drive Tour, is that for that reason you pay your own way?
Yeah,
Yeah.
absolutely. And I mean, flights now to America, flights across the world are incredibly excessive. Like return flights to the US now are $3,000 when before COVID I could fly return to LA for $1,200. If you got lucky, you could find a special for $800-900. That's actually been the main reason why I've basically been in the US for this whole season. There's a number of times where I could have flown home and get back to regular training life, but it was just financially not feasible. This year alone will cost me about 80,000 Australian to compete both in the US and around the world.
Oh.
Yeah, so I mean, I knew the financial decision I was making before the season started, but yeah, as I said, if I choose to do something, it's to do it to the best of my ability, and it's always to become the best in the world at it, and that's absolutely what was required of me this year, to compete against the best in the world at every event.
So did you work that out sort of beforehand? You had a look at the schedule, what was potentially involved, and gave yourself a bit of a budget, and then go out and try and find obviously as much of that money as you can to help you?
Absolutely. I outlined a budget which I thought was reasonable, and added a percentage on top of that as a kind of buffer zone. And conservatively, the budget has far exceeded that. I've competed in the US back in 2018 and 2019 in other sports. I love coming to America, but I haven't been back since COVID. So I thought I knew what the cost of living and how to budget in the US. But the US is incredibly expensive to live in now, especially the democratic states. The cost of living is absurd. Flights are way more expensive than I remembered previously.
Is
And
that
then the
internal? Is that internal as well? Your
yeah,
internal flies? Yeah.
internally and internationally. And then you throw the currency conversion in as well, and it throws your budget out by 50% every time, which was something that I should have taken into account, but I didn't. Like, you go out for lunch in the US, and just like a simple lunch of maybe burger and chips would be, like, in Australia, $20. In the US, it's also 20 US, but then you convert it back, so now it's 30 Australian. So that food threw the budget out a lot. And as competing as an elite athlete, training as much as I do, trying to eat 3,500 to 4,000 calories a day is expensive, and it's even more expensive when you're not living at a home with a kitchen where you can cook like you used to. So you're eating out a lot more. That's probably the thing that I most inaccurately budgeted for was food and nutrition.
Yeah, but such an important part. It's not something you can skip, as you say, with the amount of training and travel you do. It's
No,
vital to what you do.
no,
And yeah, the Aussie US is awful at the moment, as we
yeah,
know, and it really does add up.
yeah.
And what do you do to manage that? Is that just, again, just something to budget and just put a buffer on, or do you sort of try and work it out at the worst case scenario as a currency rate, like a 60-cent buffer? Or
Sorry, are you there?
yep.
Oh,
Oh,
sorry,
sorry.
you froze on my end for
Oh, that's
about
all right.
30 seconds.
What do you do to manage that sort of currency exposure side of it, or is it just one of those things you have to deal with?
Yeah, it's kind of just one of those things you have to deal with. I kind of budgeted my year in, it was like kind of three separate parts, and I've got a little bit closer to being more accurate in the third and last part now. So it's a lot more manageable when you're on top of it and you know the costs associated with living. Like, at the start of the year, you're just like, where is my money going? Like, I'm not trying to spend money on things I don't need. I'm trying to be conservative, but the money's disappearing, and not understanding where it was going until you look back on it, and just your normal necessities that you entail in everyday life just a lot more expensive over here.
And do you pay all that from your Australian bank, like, as you go, or do you have a US account now that you transfer X amount across to help you sort of live?
So I'm currently with ING, but I'm going to change because they recently changed their policies. So overseas transaction fees, overseas ATM fees didn't exist with ING up until recently. So it was a really good asset to have overseas, and that did save me a lot of money as well as the currency conversion was right on market. So in terms of not costing extra money in excess fees and stuff like that, it was a good option. But I'm going to have to find an alternative now.
Cool. Well, I'll introduce you to SportsFX later. So with can you open, because you're not obviously living there, but you're there quite a lot now? Can you open up yourself a US bank account, or you don't have the right visa, or how does that work for you?
Yeah, that's something I've literally started looking into in the last few days for the future. So I've been in the US this year on a number of ESTA visas, which have been fine, but it's difficult to kind of establish yourself or anything in the US without a social security number. But yeah, next year moving forward will be the athlete P1 visas. So that will come with some more kind of benefits and stuff like that. But it's something I need to do a lot more research on for next year. I threw myself in the deep end very early on and made this happen out of nowhere. So didn't really have any pre-established things in place for competing in the US.
Okay. And then on the flip side of all that, what kind of prize money is there on offer for you to just say it's cost you 80 grand this year, roughly to be there? What sort
Yeah.
of prize money is on offer, and how much return on your investment can you get with all that?
Yeah, so I went into this year knowing I wasn't going to gain financially at all, or break even, or go close, just because of where the sport was. But I still needed to be here and to pursue this. So the first 8 events of the tour, first prize was 10,000 US. The two events preceding those are our first 2 majors, where first place is 30,000 US. And then World Championships is the last event of the year, where I believe first will be 200 US. And in those events, the top 16 athletes get paid. In those 10 tour events, the fields are limited to 64 professional athletes. And then the events overseas are smaller prize pools on top of that. But even despite those being small prize pools, the one positive we are able to take out of it as athletes is, with GF Sports and Entertainment coming in, that's the most amount of prize money in one season for the tour. It was over $1 million US for the year. So despite it being spread out across a number of events in total, it's a good investment on their behalf. And looking at the figures trending, with the majors going up to 30,000 US, and then being on TV as well, and then Worlds being more, that's kind of a new minimum we expect as athletes next year, with the majority of events being on TV. So, I mean, I'm confident that the majority of athletes will be able to make a living from this sport. But there's a lot more now to being an elite athlete in terms of revenue sources when it comes to social media, branding, appearances, stuff like that. And then you really need to leverage all of those rather than just relying on your prize money, especially while this sport grows.
Yeah, no, it's a good point. And it's good to hear that at least there is, so you can see by the figures you've given there, that there is opportunity to earn that money back and obviously make some. But
Yeah.
as you say, it's now leveraging your brand and growing your brand and growing your social presence and sponsorships, and whether it's affiliate deals and whatever it may be, to build multiple streams of revenue when you are an athlete.
Yeah. Yeah, definitely. I've been pushing hard on the social media side. I've grown my Instagram and TikTok accounts over 20K since April. Had millions and millions of views across both of those, which is one thing the majority of the athletes on the grid aren't taking advantage of. They're kind of just waiting for the sport to grow itself instead of growing themselves with the sport, which is one advantage that will pay out for me when the sport does grow up. I mean, will always push as hard as I can to be the number one in the sport, and push to be the face of the sport. So the quicker I can achieve those, the better. And there's a lot more than just the results in a sport, in this modern sporting world.
Yeah, 100%. 100%. And what have your tactics been with Instagram and TikTok for other people? Are you using a lot of video, just a lot of posts, a lot of consistency, or just a sort of range of everything?
Yeah, just consistency in providing entertaining and engaging content. Um, One thing I believe the sport needs to do is, instead of just targeting people who have had a previous interest in long drive, it's reaching out into new markets to engage new eyes, to bring them into the sport. So while I do post long drive content, there's a lot of content outside of that to engage the golf world and engage other markets to bring them in.
Yeah, yeah, no, it's definitely a huge important piece. And as you say, if you can sort of get it right, or get into it, or at least just build it as the sport's growing, hopefully like that, it'll supplement some income here or there to help you keep getting better and better and focus on training.
Exactly. It also makes you more attractive to sponsors. Like, the majority of the athletes can only sell their real estate on their apparel when they're competing. But if you can offer an extensive social media profile in accordance with that, you instantly become more valuable, and you can ask for more money, and you'll become more appealing to these sponsors.
And is that potentially some sort of like paid joint venture, like you and company X, and you promoting there to your social platforms? Is that sort of one avenue you're looking at?
Yeah, absolutely. I've recently outlined a deal with a major company in the golf world, on those kind of terms, where they mainly get pushed through social media because that's where their main presence is, but then also having a presence on the World Long Drive Tour. Um, so there's a lot of value there for sponsors, and the, there's a lot of potential for sponsors to get in now while athletes' values are lower, because the sport is a lower profile, and then they will see a return when the sport does explode. And it is a little bit risky if they take that approach where they're investing now to get a return later. But I'm confident that Long Drive has a great product with a lot of potential, and I can see it exceeding the size that it was previously, and that's something that these companies will get a reward on. At the forefront of that was Adidas, that I'm sponsored by. Was sponsored by them before the season even started, so I hadn't achieved any results in competition yet, but they'd seen my progress in training and seen how quickly I was able to get to the level to compete against the best in the world, and that's the kind of investment and risk that they took in me and in the sport, to get a return down the line when my value is worth more as an athlete.
Yeah. Yeah, no, it definitely sounds like the whole sport, as you say, the competitions are growing. You've got world championships, you've got the international competitions, and more athletes coming on board. Now with TV and like that, it's a bit of patience, because it'll come, it will just take time. But it's
Exactly.
fantastic to hear that it's all going in the right direction, and it sounds like you're very much at the forefront of it all.
Yeah, I'm excited at the time I got into the sport, and being able to help drive the growth and take the sport to a new level.
Yeah, well, that's awesome, mate. That's probably a perfect way to finish that off. That was a fantastic chat, mate. Really, really insightful. Thank you very much for your time.
No worries. Thank you for having me.
Yeah, that's brilliant, mate. Perfect.